stay where I am in control. I hide behind my work, safe and sure of what to say. I know I must seem hard. I know I must seem cold. I never touched that girl. You think I touched a child yet? I'd hardly seen her face before. I swear I swore we'd barely met. These people tried to scare you with things I never said. I know it makes no sense. I swear I don't know why. You see me as I am. You can't believe I lie. You can't believe I do these deeds. A little man who's scared and blind, too lost to find the words he needs. I never touched that child. God, I never raised my hand. I stand before you now, incredibly afraid. I pray you understand.
So, I mean, it's tricky. I've been given pieces of paper to write comments on you, and you know, writing about music is like dancing about architecture, someone once said. It's a very, very hard thing to do. And I think it's only fair to you to just let you know before I comment on each of you what my criteria were, because obviously I have to decide what I'm looking for in the performances, particularly when there's such a huge stylistic range of music. You know, modern music, older classical music, obviously something a lot more jazzy in the second half in the advanced category. So the things I was particularly looking for were obviously technique. You know, it's not everything, but it is very important in music. And I think if you choose a piece which is technically challenging, it's really important that you're well on top of that music. And if you're not yet, maybe for a competition, it's better to choose something which is, you know, comfortably within your grasp technically. So just little things like keeping a secure sense of pulse all the way through the piece, even when you get to those tricky passages. We've all been in concerts where we've got to the tricky bit and just gone and slowed down, and perhaps we should have practiced that part more. Things like dynamics, really making sure that the piece is under your fingers, or that the text, the diction, the nuances of the words, if you're a singer, are really within your grasp and you understand what the text is about. The second thing is expression. Obviously, it's the most important aspect in music. So the dynamics, the sense of line, and that's whether you're a singer or whether you're an instrumentalist. I think even for a drummer, you know, you can have a sense of line, you've got that sense of groove across the music, and that's very important to carry through. And then finally, the most important thing for me, the reason I personally play music is because I enjoy it. And I'm sure that's true of your music teachers and hopefully for you too. And I really do like to see someone on stage, whether or not you're nervous, conveying that sense of enjoyment. You know, if not actually eyeballing the audience, just showing them that you enjoy the music you're playing and you actually want to share the music. So that's a really important aspect for me. Okay, so I think we're going to look at the intermediate category first. And we started with Henry. Where's Henry? Henry, hi. You played the Seitz. Lovely piece, very sort of classic piece from the classical period. I like the way you announced your entrance on the violin. There was this sense of anticipation as you built up to your entry. You know, it's quite tricky when you've got one of those classical sonatas that has a long piano introduction. But I thought you did a good job of looking really determined, preparing for your entry, and really making a statement when you came in. There was some very well practiced technical aspects to the piece. So I like the way you practice your triplets. Like I mentioned just before, you kept your sense of pulse throughout those. Mostly secure intonation. There are maybe one or two places where you're switching between registers, where you could just work on string switching and making sure that you're really in tune when you hit those upper notes. That's something to work on over time. And you know, in the middle of the piece, you've got that lovely cantabile section with a more dramatic beginning and end. I think make even more of those lines and try and aim to have that sense of line running through the phrase, you know, long lines, almost as if you were playing like a singer would sing, if that makes sense. The last thing I'd say is that your double stopping was very good at the end. You know, it's a big flourish to the end of that piece, isn't it? And I thought you handled that very well. I could see that you put in a lot of practice there. And as a listener, I appreciated that. And the final thing I'd say is maybe just a tip, don't be afraid to bow. Remember, even if you're really nervous, fake it till you make it, you know. Just stand there at the end, acknowledge the audience, because they are, after all, applauding you. And I think walking off could be construed as a bit presumptuous. So do please bow to the audience and just take your time. When you've played your last note, just pause for a moment. Let it sink in, and then bring your bow down. Other than that, I thought that was a very, very commendable performance, so well done. Next we had Thomas, played the Bernstein. Yeah, you've got a lovely tone, Thomas. So I think in any instrument, but particularly in a wind instrument, I think the tone that comes across from the outset, from the first note, is the most important thing for me. And I've written that you have a really beautiful, full, rounded tone on trumpet. It's a beautiful piece. It's not one that I know. You presume you know what else Bernstein wrote. What's he famous for? West Side Story, obviously. So we know that Bernstein can write a tune. What we know is that he can write very rhythmically. Obviously, West Side Story is based on Latin American rhythms. This is an example of Bernstein writing just, as he calls it himself, a simple piece. And I think what isn't maybe immediately apparent to the audience is actually quite how hard that piece is. There are big switches between the low notes and the high notes, and on the trumpet, that's not an easy thing to do. And I have to say, I felt you really made that deceptively simple line feel quite effortless. and the switches between the high and the low notes were very well handled. They were in tune. Good sense of pulse throughout, and I particularly like the way you played all the way through some of those longer phrases, as if you were aiming towards an end point. If that makes sense? There was a sense of sort of musical flow through your performance. Take time at the ends of phrases to let the music breathe. So I mentioned before that you kept a good sense of pulse, but I think you can actually just pull back, a little bit of rubato, just hold back at the ends of phrases, take time to breathe before you start on the next phrase. Again, I mean, I keep on referring to this, but a bit like a singer. Do you sing in the choir? Oh, shame on you. You should definitely sing in the choir. Every musician should sing in the choir. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. But imagine you are a singer, because I think that's a useful thing to do as a wind or even a string player. The final thing I'd say is even more dynamic contrast. So, you know, you did have some differences between the louds and the quiets, but you could do even more in places, particularly building up to the climax, which is about 2/3 of the way through that piece. But a beautiful performance, very, very well shaped, and you've got a lovely tone, so keep up your playing. Then we had, is it Kuhlau? Jarry. And you played the Kuhlau. Yeah, now, that classical repertoire can sound, you know, quite straightforward to an untrained listener. I'm sure there aren't that many untrained listeners here, if any at all. It can sound kind of easy, throw away, the melodies are simple. You know, people often say, well, you know, Mozart just writes tunes that are pretty on the ear. They're very, very hard to play well. You know this, don't you? I could see when you came off and you were like, yes, I did well. So the things that are hard to play in a piece from that era, this was obviously Kuhlau, not Mozart, but it's not dissimilar. The hands were very well balanced. Your left hand Alberti bass, that was really just kept bubbling below your right hand, and you brought out that melody in your right hand beautifully, so it was just the right balance. The Alberti bass was light, I've already mentioned that. I like the way you gave the music room to breathe at the cadences. So whenever you had a perfect cadence, I'm sure you know what that is, at the end of a phrase, you just paused for a moment before you continued, and that gave the music some room to breathe. The scaling passages, well, I can see you practiced your scales. They were very well handled. You know, why do we practice our scales? Because when we play a piece like this, it makes it easier, right? So if your music teachers ever bug you about doing that, there's a reason for it. They felt effortless, and it meant that you could turn them into music. There was a sense of line in them. Really good dynamic contrast between the sections. Maybe the forte section was a bit too ferocious for me in places, but I mean, that's fine. You were making the most of the piece, and I think you were bringing out the drama inherent in it. So well done. Fantastic performance. Then we had Bertie. Where's Bertie? Bertie, hi there. I was just saying to your teachers, it's so nice to hear a Jason Robert Brown song that isn't still hurting. I hear a lot of girls singing that song, and it's a fantastic song, but hearing a boy singing one of his songs is quite different, actually. I don't hear this song very often. So, his music's very emotional. What do you think you need to bring out in that? What were you trying to convey? I wanted to ask you, actually.
Like his weakness at that point, it's his last stand, kind of.
Yeah. So, Jason Robert Brown's songs tend to bring out the emotion in whatever scene is being portrayed dramatically, and I thought you did that extremely well. So the trick is to bring out the story without ever over-singing, because I've heard performances of music by this composer that are just too musical theatre, they're too big, you know, the notes are it's too much vibrato. Actually, under-singing, I think, is the way to make this music convincing, and that's exactly what you did. You undersung it. You didn't try and go too big just for the sake of, you know, emotion. And I really liked that. I appreciated that. You were human. You came across as a human being, and that's what you need to convey. So fantastic communication with the audience from the outset. You were looking at us, you were communicating with us, you were scanning the room, very important as a singer. I mean, in some senses, when you're playing an instrument, it's actually tougher to communicate with the audience, isn't it? Because you've got that instrument as a potential block between you and them. As a singer, it's easier, there's nothing, but you're also more exposed. And I thought you brought out that kind of naked emotion in the character without feeling like you were being awkward on stage. It was very well done. Very good diction. You obviously learned the song off by heart, which was very much appreciated. Excellent delivery of the text, and I really liked your upper register. So obviously you're someone who's at an age where your voice is still developing, and I think that upper register will begin to blossom, but I appreciated the fact that you didn't over-sing up there. You just did what you could, And you've got a lovely tone up there, so that will develop as you get older. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I said here is take time to let your upper register mature, because it will come with time. And for the meantime, don't make it forced, as you did today. You didn't make it forced. So well done. On to, is it Iseoluwa? Did I pronounce that correctly? Iseoluwa, thank you. Yeah, I love this piece. I saw Van Halen at Wembley when I was about 16. One of my favourite gigs ever. And they played this song, so you know it's one of my favourites. Great synth solo as well. Great choice of song. I mean, I guess I'm biased. Super precise playing all the way through. So the one thing I find with drummers, particularly younger drummers, is that they often get so carried away in the fills, they go and the fills just bring the whole thing out of time. But everything you played was excellent and precise. You know, everything was right where it needs to be. The backbeat on the ride cymbal during the guitar solo was very groovy. It's not a technical word, but I found that groovy. I think you can let go even more on that. So the one thing I felt was that your playing is superb. Now maybe just show your enjoyment to the audience even more. And that doesn't need to be by grinning at the audience, but just let go, you know. Enjoy the drum kit a bit more, you know, because your playing is very, very good. And the precision is probably the hardest bit. So now just let go and enjoy yourself a little bit. Thank you very much. And finally, no, Bertie. That's advanced. So should we announce?
Shall we announce the intermediate?
Okay, in third place, which is called, thank you. This is highly commended. We have Thomas. In second place, this was a tricky one, but we have Bertie. And in first place, for an extremely classy, polished and poised performance, we have Jarry. Right, on to the advanced. So I have to say, all of you were playing to an extremely high standard. For me, it was just a pleasure to sit back and enjoy hearing you all play. Very tricky to choose a winner and to choose the runners-up, but I mean, we've made the decision. So let's go through some comments first of all. So we have Bob playing saxophone, Hindemith Sonata. Yeah. Were you first? We had Huxley first. Tell you what, I'm going to talk about Bob, seeing as I'm on your sheet. So I understand your accompanist isn't a massive fan of Hindemith. Is that a fair comment? I have to say, I quite like Hindemith. I mean, he's spiky, and I agree with you, probably wouldn't have been a very nice person to meet. But there's something dark and interesting about that, and I thought you brought that out really well, Bob. He writes extremely well for wind instruments. So I remember, I'm a wind player, like clarinet at school. I remember playing his clarinet sonata. And there's just something a little bit dark and interesting about that piece. And I thought you engaged very, very well with the darkness. I thought in terms of your technique on saxophone, your tonguing was extremely good, your articulation. You're still developing your lower register, but I felt that when you were playing, you know, D or below, if you don't mind me getting sort of technically saxy, I thought your tone is really full and rich. Just keep on working on long tones, you know, blow long notes for a long period of time, because that will help you to feel more secure down there. Excellent sense of breath control and line. Again, like one or two people in the intermediate, I felt you had a good sense of flow through your phrases. One thing I'd say is before you start playing, make sure you take the time to tune carefully. So the saxophone is an instrument that is actually really hard to tune across the upper and lower register. The upper register can go sharp, the lower register flat. And I think you got into tune extremely quickly, but there were just one or two notes in the first phrase that were slightly off until you settled. So take that time. Tricky second movement, I thought you handled extremely well. And I like the way you were sort of engaging with your body in the rhythm. That's good to hear in music like that, good to see. Because it gave us as an audience a sense that you were really engaged with that music and you were actually sort of embodying it in yourself. which is, you know, it's a good thing to watch, and it helps you to play, probably helps you to relax as well when you're playing. The one thing I'd say is, in the climax of that piece, it's pretty wild. The piano part's ridiculous. You might as well be going like that, or like that. I felt that you can match the wildness of the piano even more with your part. Just get wilder in that climax. You just need to be able to match and reflect the, you know, the intensity of the piano part. And the final thing I'd say is, you acknowledged your accompanist at the end, which was excellent. Other people did too, but I thought you were very polite in the way you acknowledged her, and I appreciated that, because we all know how much work our accompanists put in, and probably how much you learned from rehearsing with them as well, because you know, you're lucky to have such a superb accompanist here. And you know, please do make the most of the musical wisdom that she'll give you when you have those rehearsals with her. So I thought that was very polite. Okay, going back to Huxley. Yeah, intense. It's an intense piece. You know, Lalo tends to write either very flashy pieces, other movements of his Symphonie Espagnole. This movement is intense in a slower, more concentrated way. And I thought you brought a lot of concentration to your lines. You brought a lovely sense of vibrato. I like the way you grew your vibrato through your phrases. It's a brave choice, actually, because it's quite an exposing piece on violin. There's nowhere to go in some of those longer lines you have to play, and I thought they were very poised. I thought you managed them very well. From the outset, you had a singing line. I thought your attack was good on your down bow. Sorry, you could do a little bit more on the up bow just to make sure that you've got that sense of an arc phrase through the line. Really good dynamic contrast. Excellent switches between register, particularly in the first section. I think in the middle passage, where you've got that slightly chromatic line, there were one or two places where it felt you could perhaps work slowly on some of those technical switches, because there were just one or two notes that were ever so slightly out of tune. So maybe that middle bit is something to work on. A general tip for all of you, if you're learning a piece and you're practicing, don't start at the beginning, because everyone does that. You know, drop in at random places in the piece, start in the middle, start towards the end. Practice bits that aren't the beginning, because invariably you'll feel more confident when you get to that part of the piece if you started there. Have you said that to them before?
No.
Oh, right. I thought
Their
that was
teachers have.
yeah, it's the kind of thing that every music teacher bangs on about, I would have thought. Yeah, don't just practice at the beginning. You'll probably think that's a really obvious bit of advice, but it's still a good thing to do. The final high passage I thought was really sensitively handled, Huxley. And one thing I enjoyed was that your intonation on that high harmonic was beautiful, and your final diminuendo was absolutely exquisite. I really enjoyed that. You'd obviously worked on getting that line to just fade away to niente, to nothing. So well done. Okay, moving on. We have Trissie with the Manuel the Fire. That's a tricky piece, isn't it? You know, I mean, but well played. And you played that by memory, which is no mean feat, because there are a lot of notes in that huge range of expression. I thought it was a lovely lilting performance, I said. You really conjured that sense of sort of Spanish light in Andaluza in southern Spain. And there were contrasts between the sections. The one comment I'd make to you expressively maybe is do even more to contrast the longer legato passages where you have to use a lot of pedalling. You want those to be flowing and glacial and magical, conjuring up this sense of sort of an expansive Spanish landscape. Contrasting with those really tricksy right-hand runs, where you want to use maybe a little bit less pedalling. You want to bring those out. You want the articulation to be really clear. So the one thing I'd say is you could perhaps do a little bit more to create contrast between those passages, the long legato sections and the more tricksy, intricate, articulated passages. Lovely sense of rubato, though. I love the way you brought your phrases to an end and then restarted them. It felt like you were breathing appropriately as the music dictates. Generally good pedalling. Like I say, in some of those right-hand passages, you could be a little bit lighter in your pedalling, I think, your sustained pedal. Very, I hope this is an appropriate word, but I've said acute ending. Do you remember the ending? Ba-dum-bum. It was a real lovely throwaway ending, and I thought that was quite stylish, the way you played that, so well done. I enjoyed that immensely. We have Gabriel. Gabriel, hi there. Yeah, great song. Absolutely great song. It's a gift to a singer. You know, Gurney writes so well. So you have a beautiful voice. I really enjoy hearing a tenor. not least because I'm a baritone, I'll never be a tenor, and I kind of wish I was, but I can't sing that high. You've got a great sense of musical line. Your vibrato is developed for your age, but not too developed. I appreciated the fact that you probably could have gone further with your vibrato, but you didn't. I think that's appropriate for this style of singing. If you were singing Wagner, that would be an entirely different thing. Lovely dynamic contrast, great shading you brought to your performance. I like the way you use vibrato to bring richness to certain phrases, to bring out the text, because I felt that you were doing that in a slightly sort of intellectual way. You're actually choosing when to use it and when not to use it, and that came across in your performance. Be very, very careful with one or two of the higher notes. There were just one or two little swoops up to those higher notes. It's almost impossible to avoid as a singer, but just, you know, practice that when you're actually working on your own in the room. It didn't spoil it at all, but just there was one or two places where I noticed those. The one thing I'd say as a performer is your voice is so strong, and your sense of the text, your delivery of the text is so strong. It's a shame to clasp your hands. I think you've got to either put your hands by your side, or even, if you feel comfortable doing it, move slightly with the song. You know, not everyone feels comfortable doing that, and that's fine. You know, I was a chorister when I was a kid, and I learned to sing like that too. But I think you just need to open your hands, otherwise it creates a block with the audience slightly. Great, well sung. And then the final performance was Ed. Where's Ed? Ed, hi there. Great piece. I played it myself, and I know it well, and the intricacies and those nasty harmonics. But yeah, I thought from the first note, the thing I noticed about you is that you've got a personal sound on your instrument. And that's something I think we all want to achieve on our instruments. Many of you are, you know, a long way to creating a sound that's yours. But you immediately had a sound, you knew what you wanted to do with the instrument, you were using your diaphragm control, your articulation, your tonguing, your control of dynamics, and obviously those, you know, that very, very wide pitch range. You were doing what you wanted to with it. It felt like you were in control of the music. I like the way you use those lip slurs. Obviously this piece isn't improvised, you're playing for music, but it should feel like it's improvised, and that added a nice jazzy touch. You don't want to do that too much. I thought you used them tastefully. Any more than that might be getting a bit much. But towards the end, when you've got that chromatic ascending line, I thought your false fingerings, sorry, it's a technical sax thing, your false fingerings were very, very well managed. I enjoyed those. You've got a rich tone across your range. I like the fact that you were light at your upper end. You actually underplayed when you went high, and that's very important on saxophone, particularly alto, because it can sound shrill otherwise. And that's the right thing to do, back off when you go high. The one thing I'd say with your dynamics, which were generally very contrasting, really intense when they needed to be, is in that section just coming towards the end, when you go into a swing feel, I felt that you could perhaps underplay slightly. So the temptation is to make it sound really groovy by blowing hard. You don't actually need to do that. You can underblow and use your articulation and the way you control the phrases to create that intensity without necessarily having a sort of fortissimo dynamic. Harmonic at the end, it's the harmonic that sax players dread, very hard to play. You've obviously been practicing some long notes, but as I said to the other sax player, just keep it up. Practicing long, low notes is boring, but it really helps you extend your range and feel confident up there. So well played, excellent performance. And our winners. In third place, we have Gabriel. With a game. In second place, we have Huxley. First place for a performance that really was on top of all the technical aspects and expressive aspects of what he was playing, Ed. Thank you very much. That was a really pleasurable hour and a half.